What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and today we're talking about investing in the Pokemon space, and we're going to be talking about it at a really high, like, macro level. And I know I usually talk really fast here on this channel, but we're going to slow it down just a bit because this is something that's really important to me. And you know, I've been investing in high-end cards in general, sports cards, for a long time, and then Pokemon over the last couple years, for about 20 years now. So I've been doing this a while. Now, that doesn't mean that I have all the answers. It doesn't mean that I'm always right. But what I can tell you is this, is I have seen a lot over the last 20 years. And I know the Pokemon market's really exciting right now. I know there's a lot of really cool and just engaging things that are going on, and everybody's so pumped, and they should be rightfully. But I thought this would be a really interesting time for us to kind of step back, and I can share some of my learnings over the last 20 years. And I've got some really cool graphs here at the end that I'm going to walk you through. Now, I thought this image was a really cool one to start off with, because the reality is, in any type of investment, there's always this fine line between taking risk and getting rich, right? Even if you go to a normal, regular, everyday financial advisor, the very first thing they're going to do is they're going to put you through some kind of risk assessment test, whether it's written or verbal or whatever, and then based off your tolerance for risk, they're going to assign you a basket of funds or indexes or investments to try and get you where you want to go. Now, Pokemon is something I would describe as a very risky alternative investment, right? It's not real estate, it's not stocks, it's not bonds. Like, it is very much an alternative investment. And I think it's very important for us to understand that at the end of the day, we're investing in cardboard and ink. You know, it's not like you're buying a stock. We're going to talk a lot about how sports cards in general, particularly, and I'll explain why we're going to focus on them here on a Pokemon channel here in just a minute, but we're going to see how they performed against the S&P 500 for really the last 20 years. And I think it's going to be very important for us to talk about how that segment of the cardboard and ink area has performed. That way we can have some idea of the way Pokemon might perform in the future. And it's really cool because there's this saying that I like, you know, and it says you put a person with experience and you put a person with money in the same room, and the person with the experience walks away with the money, and the person with the money walks away with the experience. And what I'm hoping to accomplish through this video is to provide everybody with, you know, years and years worth of experience in a short amount of time. Now, it is impossible to accomplish that in its totality. Some of this you just have to experience, you just have to feel, you just have to collect through some of these very crazy times in order to get that. But hopefully showing everybody the way sports cards have performed over the last 18-20 years will give us some idea of how Pokemon might possibly perform. Now, I've mentioned the sports card thing a couple times, and the reason I'm doing that is because Pokemon is in its infancy. You have never heard me on this channel use the word vintage and Pokemon in the same sentence. Pokemon launched in Japan in 1996, right? And in the US in 1999. Nothing from 1996 and 1999 in my mind is vintage. That's not a bad thing. For me, it's incredibly exciting because we have these opportunities. A lot of these cards, a lot of these origin cards, a lot of these cards from the very beginning of this awesome collecting, investing hobby that we love so much are still in their infancy. Now, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you know, hopefully a lot of us are still in it because, again, if you were viewing this as an investment portfolio, you should be in it for the long run. You know, if we look back, then we can start calling them vintage cards. But for right now, in my humble opinion, a lot of these cards are very at approachable price points, and there's still a lot of them in the market. So I thought it'd be really cool for us to look at that because now we're starting to finally get into the age where, you know, nothing is vintage yet, but we are starting to get some age on some of these products. Now, when you look at the sports card space, right, sports cards started coming out in the late 1800s. You know, my earliest card in my collection is from 1911 in the sports card space. Now, it's hard to compare the origin of Pokemon cards to the origin of sports cards because that was so long ago, right? Like, it is really hard to keep any cards, forget about any condition, just to hold on to cards for over 100 years. So the population reports of those cards in the early sports eras are non-existent versus Pokemon, where we are going to continue to see strong population reports when you're looking at them from a grading perspective, which is what we're going to talk about here. You're going to see strong numbers, but that is only one piece of the pie, right? When you think about price appreciation over time, there's two components to it. It's supply and demand. So yes, there might be more supply of these more recent Pokemon products than there are of, say, 1930, 40, 50, 60 football, baseball, basketball cards, but you got to think about the demand, right? Pokemon is global, so there's global demand for it. You got to think about the fact that they have so many different avenues, right? They have this amazing anime series. They have movies that come out. They have all kinds of plushies and toys, and it is just such an all-encompassing brand that the TCG side of things is a small part of it. And I think that the fact that it is so far-reaching and that it has so many different products continues to give it strength, and I think will continue to allow it to grow. That way the supply will be met by equal demand in the future. Now, again, I don't really consider myself a Pokemon investor, which might surprise a lot of you, because if you invest in something, that means your intent is to sell it at a later date, either to fund more investments or to fund your lifestyle at that point. And in my dream scenario, I don't sell my cards. I'm a growth collector. I only collect things that I think they're going to appreciate in value, which is why I do all the work I do here. But I don't really plan on selling them. I think that in PikaPikaPapa's nirvana somewhere down the road, I do a not-for-profit, TCG and sports card shop. And again, I don't want to put money into it. When I say not-for-profit, I want it to make enough money to pay for itself. But I want to have employees that are really well paid. I want to have a common gathering place where I can show off my collection, and kids and parents and everybody can come in and enjoy. And we can offer some really competitive pricing, because I always try and support my local card shops, but I understand they have to turn a profit. And it's really hard for their pricing to compare to a lot of the online shops. So maybe in PikaPikaPapa's retirement, we do something that is just break even, and it's just an awesome, cool gathering point. And I'm able to do that because when I think about my sports cards and I think about my Pokemon card collection, like, this represents 0% of my overall investment portfolio. Like, yes, they could all go to zero tomorrow, and it would not affect the way my family and I are going to live in the future. It's just not a part of what we have baked into our retirement plan. Would I be very sad? Yes. Would it crush my soul to the bone? It absolutely would. But I also understand that this is a risky avenue. This is something that I enjoy. Sometimes I come across as I'm all about the money and the investing side of things, but really nothing could be further from the truth. Outside of this PikaPikaPapa space, my kids and I and my wife, we go to collecticons, like, we enjoy the cards. We rip so much that we don't show on this channel. My kids have binders and binders, and we love sending cards off to PSA, and I just get so much incredible joy from this hobby that the investing side of things is kind of just a little icing on the cake for me. So we're going to be looking at some graphs here, and again, it's going to show the way that sports cards have performed for a while, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that, the past doesn't always repeat itself. I always say it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, so we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And but I do want people to have kind of eyes wide open as we head into this. And then after we get done with the sports cards things at the very end, we're going to look at Pokemon cards and see how they've performed pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and then post-pandemic. And hopefully at the end, that'll kind of wrap it all up. And we'll just have a real fun time talking through what all that might mean, or what it doesn't mean, or just how much we don't know. Because as I said, at the end of the day, none of us know what the heck is going to happen, but we certainly can spend a lot of time and effort. And the reason I do all these data dives is to try and give us some idea. And you work hard for your money, and so do I. So hopefully we feel good when we spend it. Now, with all that being said, listen, we do tons of data dives. We do tons of fun stuff here on the PikaPikaPapa channel. So if that is right up your alley, we're building an amazing community. I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Questions or comments, drop them down below. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Those 3 small things go a really long way in helping my small channel out, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So without further ado, let's start looking at some of these numbers here. Now, first, let me qualify what this is. So this is a graph that PWCC, which is a major online auction house, put out right in the middle of the pandemic. And I will say this, the whole point that they created this graph was because they were trying to continue to kind of stir the frenzy of card collecting and card investing, right? Now, PWCC has Pokemon cards, they have TCG cards, right? They have sports cards, they have all kinds of different things on there. So it's a really good data point. It's a really good website for us to look at. But what they were trying to do is chum the water a bit and get more people to come in. And the whole point of this was to say, hey, listen, look, if you invest in sports cards, you can outperform the S&P 500. So this started at the beginning of 2008 all the way to the middle of 2022. Now, one of the interesting things I thought about this is they have not updated this post-pandemic, right? Why? Because what happened is what we all thought was going to happen. Cards start to normalize afterwards, and it doesn't tell the story that they were trying to sell when they were saying, hey, listen, come to our auction house, spend all your money, buy these cards because you're going to crush the S&P 500. Now, the other thing that I want want to say about this is, listen, this is the PWCC 500. So what that is those are the top 500 cards in the sports card space. Baseball, basketball, football, even hockey is in there. So these are the creme de la creme. Like, these are the top 500. These are the Mickey Mantle rookie cards, the Hank Aaron rookie cards, Wayne Gretzky rookie cards, Michael Jordan rookie cards. So we're talking about all of these are six-figure plus cards. Most of them are, not all of them, but a lot of them are six figures. Some of them are $1 million cards in there. So a lot of these cards are cards that we can't really afford. At least I can't. But the interesting thing to do is when you look at this and you think about this period of time, okay, you see there's all kinds of things that happened, right? 2007 to 2009, we had the Great Recession. And then guess what happened after that? We jumped into one of the longest bull markets in the history of the US stock market, right? In this period of time, we had, I think, Greece, right? Greece defaulted on its loans and it had to get bailed out by other countries in the EU. And in 2016, we had Brexit, and that shook up the global economy like to its core. It was amazing what happened in 2016. And then you look at all of these different things that have happened, and yet you can see how sports cards have performed. At least these top 500, it has performed very well against the S&P 500 over time. Now, again, you got to watch this whole video, because I'm telling you right now, you have to take this with a huge, huge, huge grain of salt. And I want you all to remember the dollar amount that is associated with some of these top cards. So in the next graph right here, here's the interesting thing. We're going to take out the top 100 cards. We're just going to look at cards 101 to 500 and look how this graph has fundamentally changed. Now remember, those top 100 cards that I was just talking about, these are $100,000 card, $1 million cards. Like, they are cards that most of us, I would imagine, we just can't afford. It's not that we don't want them and we don't dream about them, or maybe if we win the lottery someday, we'll build that Pokemon dream collection where money's no option and I'm out there buying PSA 10 base set first edition Charizard hollows left and right, but the reality is that's just not attainable for most of us out there. And what happens when we take out those unobtainable cards? Look how the overall return drops. It drops in half. It went from over 800% rate of return over this time down to 372%. Now you might be saying, hey, listen, PikaPikaPaPa, that is still a very solid rate of return, and that's still trumps the S&P 500, and I'm going to tell you, wait one more slide. But yes, you're right, it does. And this is one of the reasons whenever I'm talking about collecting and investing in the Pokemon space, or when I used to talk more about the sports card space as well, I always say you should buy the best cards that you can in the highest grades that you can, because that's where you're going to see the highest rate of return. Instead of buying like 4 raw cards for $80 each, if you can get one PSA 10 for say $300, overall in the long run, again, remember, whenever I talk about collecting and investing here, I'm talking about 3, 5, 10, 20-year time horizon here. The odds are that high-graded single card is going to do much better than a bunch of the raw cards. And again, also, you've seen my videos on the grading report. Typically, when you grade them further down the road, it's harder to get those PSA 10s. It's just math. I don't know why it is, but it seems to be that trend, and we've been trending this out for over the last 8 months, so I feel really confident in saying this out there. But again, let's take a look at this. Look at the lines. Look at the blue line, which is that top 101 to 500 cards in the sports card space, and you look at how the S&P 500 had some rough years, right? We talked about 2008, 2009, how the S&P 500 was down and sports cards were outperforming it, right? Then you see they kind of cross there in 2012 and the sports cards start to take off a little bit. Then we get to 2016, right? That's where we said, hey, listen, there was this Brexit that shook everything up a little bit, and you see sports cards get that bump up there, right? But then you see that the S&P 500 starts recovering, and it goes on this really crazy run there that we talked about, that bull market. Even though there was that shakeup in 2016, it still didn't go into a bear market, the S&P 500, so it retained that bull run status. And then you see that's where sports cards really started to flatten out. And then, of course, the pandemic came. You see where the S&P 500 drops off the cliff. But the thing that's really interesting about that S&P 500 drop is you see it dropped for like a blip on the radar. I love looking at data like this, especially from a financial perspective, because when you look at it over this many number of years, it gives you perspective when you're in the middle of something going wrong. Remember when the pandemic hit, and remember when everybody was freaking out, the S&P 500, the stock market was crashing. Well, when you look at this on a grander scale, look at what a small blip in time that actually was. So this is a lesson for all of us, is when you're in the middle of something, when you're in the middle of a panic, when you're in the middle of the world melting down, just remember that in the grand scheme of things, most times this is just a blip on the radar. When you think of things in a 10, 15, 20-year horizon, these are just little things, and it is always going to work itself out 9 times out of 10. So then you'll see, listen, the S&P 500 started gaining, but the PWCC 101 to 500 still ended up crushing it. Now, on the next slide right here, this is the most impactful one, and this is the one that I really want to talk about here. So this is where we look at cards 101 to 2500. So for me, in my opinion, this is a great overall representation of the entire cardboard hobby, right? You think about this. This is the top 2400 cards in the sports card space. And again, I want to say this again. I'm talking about sports cards because it is a mature product, right? It has been around since the 1900s. And I truly believe that Pokemon is starting to get into that mature phase. We have more people who are in the hobby now than we have in the past. I think there's a lot of excitement around it. I think it's starting to add, people are starting to realize that, hey, not only is this an incredible brand, an incredible franchise, like just a ton of fun in general to share with my families, but there's also a lot of opportunity there. We're seeing more grading going on, which just tells me that more people are interested in the investing side of things. So for me, this is a great overall representation of the hobby, but it's also really important here that we look at the way this has performed, okay? So take a look at this. Up until this point, if you started in 2008 in a cardboard space, up until this point, which is 7 years later, right, in 2015, you had been down. Look at the blue line. So the blue line starts at 0% in 2008. Then over 7 years, it had slowly creeped its way down and slowly crept its way back up until we finally start to cross into the black here in 2015. Now think about all of those years. That's 7 years of taking small losses to being flat. The biggest thing to call out here is that, remember, this is 101 to 2500, so this represents 2400 different cards. This is why I do all the data dives that I do. This is why I do all the research that I do. This is why I'm so passionate about getting information in front of you guys, because guess what? There were some cards that performed really well over this period. There were some cards that didn't perform well at all, and our job is, when we go through this, we have to understand that the hobby as a whole, traditionally, the hobby as a whole doesn't always go on this upward and the right trajectory. Like even right now, we're seeing some cards that are performing really softly, like Sword and Shield alt arts are getting their tails kicked right now. So you have to do your due diligence. We all work really hard for our money, and it's really important that when we decide to pull the trigger, we feel really good about where we're spending it, because there's always going to be winners, there's always going to be losers. Like at the end of the day, a lot of times Pokemon's a zero-sum game, right? Like if you're buying singles or graded cards from somebody online, guess what? The card price is either going to go up and you win, or the card price is going to go down and you lose. But at the end of the day, how fortunate are we that this is such an amazing hobby that even if the price goes down, you still have this awesome piece of artwork, which is amazing, amazing, amazing. It's not like buying a stock, right? Like when you buy a stock, guess what? All you have is a ticker symbol, even though you're an actual owner of that company, right? When you buy a stock, that means you are a part owner of that company. But for us, at least we have a cool piece of cardboard we can show off in the background instead of just having this ticker symbol that exists in our brokerage account somewhere. So back to this again, really interesting to see that if you had gotten in from 2008 to 2015, this overall market as a whole was down. And then what happens, you know, we see in 2016, the cardboard market starts to really pick up a little bit. But even then, there's this big period where it's flat and we don't see these huge price gains until the pandemic. Now, for me, it's really important to understand. I was investing heavily through all of this. The only time I stopped investing was during the pandemic. And this is why, right? Like I just knew I had collected over this entire time frame here, and I'd been doing it for so long. I started collecting high-end PSA slabs way before this too. So when I was going through this area here where I'm collecting and I'm adding to my collection and you know, I'm putting the pieces together because I know, hey, listen, this is a long-term pull for me. This isn't something I want to flip overnight. When the green box happened there on the right and things started to go crazy, guess what I did? I stopped buying because I just knew that this wasn't normal. This wasn't going to happen. It just couldn't last forever. And I knew that because, again, a person with experience and a person with money, right? There were a lot of people in this space with money who were dumping it into the Pokemon hobby. But guess what? Because I had the experience, because I've done it long enough, I had the experience to say, hey, listen, this just doesn't feel right to me. And it doesn't mean I wasn't buying anything, but it just meant anything that I was buying, I was approaching with an extreme degree of trepidation, right? Like I was doing more data dives, more research on anything before I pulled the trigger than ever before. And truth be told, a lot of times in that space, I was investing my money in the stock market. You know, any money that I would normally be spending on Pokemon cards or baseball cards or football cards, you know, I kind of pulled from that and I was putting additional funds into the stock market because we always want to buy what's low and sell what's high. And so I knew, I was like, hey, listen, the stock market's crashing, but again, I've been in the stock market for a long time. This is a great time to buy and get rich, and that's what you should do too. That's a lot of times we're talking right now about Japanese and English cards, and I don't know what's going to happen, but you know, Japanese is really hot right now, and I'm not really touching that market market, because to me it feels like, you know, Icarus is flying a little close to the sun. So I do think that this is a really cool overall kind of like snippet of how the sports card hobby has performed since 2008. And I do think that now we're coming out of the pandemic, now that things are starting to normalize, I think that we can expect a lot of flat years. Again, flat years for the hobby as a whole doesn't mean that you can't make money, doesn't mean that you can't find great investment vehicles, right? These are singles cards. There's a lot of opportunity in the sealed space, and I still think that there's a lot of opportunity in the graded space. You just got to be really you got to do your due diligence in what you're going to purchase. And then here, this is what I wanted to talk about. So this is the Pokemon. Somebody turned me on to this in the comments below, and I can't thank you enough because I really love this chart. This is from TCG Fish. And what you'll see here is this is pre-pandemic, so we have 2020 in February, which I guess wouldn't really be called pre-pandemic. Like this is pre-Pokemon pump in pandemic. So in February 2020, you're going to see the orange line represents the English daily card average sale price, which is really cool. And then the green is going to represent the Japanese. And you'll see pre-pandemic pump, English cards were selling at a premium to Japanese cards. And then you'll see that they all spiked during this pandemic pump that we were all a part of, whether we were buying, selling, sitting on the sidelines, we were all a part of it. I know I was just sitting back there popping my popcorn, eating it away, watching it. It was really cool for me to see all of this happen in the hobby. I love the fact that people were excited about it. I love the fact that it was in the news. You know, they say that no publicity is bad publicity. So I was just pumped about all of that. And again, think about this. Like I had been collecting for 20 years prior to this point. So my collection appreciated significantly. And what you see on the right of that is you'll see that the cards started to come back down. Okay. And then we saw this flip, right? Japanese is now on top of English. You know, I think that these languages are going to be a little bit cyclical. I think there will be a time where English leapfrogs Japanese, and we'll probably see this go back and forth, you know, over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But the thing I wanted to call out here is we're starting to see these daily prices normalize as to what they were pre-pandemic, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Like we need to flush out all the falses, we need to flush out, you know, all the nonsense, and we need to get back to a normal growth expectation here in the hobby. Again, if you're in the S&P 500 and you gain 7% per year, you're doing okay. Like a lot of people are excited about 7-8% returns in the stock market. I know that's all I'm expecting because I know over the long run that's going to help me achieve my financial goals, and that's more realistic. You're going to have years where you gain 15-20%. You're going to have years where you're down 5, 8, 10, maybe 20% depending on what's going on. But what you need to be doing is you need to be buttoned up. You need to have the experience. And hey, listen, on those years where we're down 20%, I'm doubling down. I'm investing even more. And on the years where we're up, I'm still investing my normal amount. But that's where I use that excess funds and I go around and I play a little bit, right? We've got a side business that we run. So maybe I invest in that, or maybe I pick up some more real estate or whatever it is. You know, I'm always looking, where can I have the best bang for my buck here? So I thought this was really cool to talk about, and I thought this was a really cool example of what has been going on kind of right up to that pandemic and what has been going on afterwards. And again, this for me is not something to freak out about. This is healthy for me. This is normal for me. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that if the market as a whole does hit a flat period over the next 2, 3, 5 years, like if you're in this for the long run, that's okay. It's a great opportunity to get in there. If you do your due diligence, if you do your research, like if you feel like you're buying quality cards, if you're buying the highest grade that you can possibly afford, just because the market as a whole might be flat, it doesn't mean that there's not tons and tons and tons of opportunity out there. So this is actually a really exciting time for me because we're starting to get those high overpriced balloon things out of here, and we're starting to get to some normal stuff where we can actually start putting together a really great collecting and investing plan moving forward. So with all of that information, listen, I know this is a slower pace than I typically do, and if you guys like it, drop it in the comments down below. I'm always welcome to slow down a little bit. But the biggest thing I wanted to call out is, you know, we looked at years and years worth of data, and the past doesn't predict the future. You know, it usually rhymes. There's usually some kind of pattern to it. But this certainly doesn't mean this is what's hard, fast, and you know, locked in going to happen in the future. There is going to be more Pokemarket driving events. We don't know what they are. We don't know when they're going to happen. Hopefully they're not another global pandemic, but there will be other things that cause the cardboard market to spike, and there's going to be other things that cause the cardboard market to go down. I'm hoping that this video is going to help all of us, you know, when these events happen, you know, kind of be steadfast in our approach. You know, the things that have helped me collect my card collection to the way it is I had an extremely narrow focus in the very beginning, and I have a lot of time on my side, and so that has helped me grow my collection to really just crazy levels. And the other thing I want to call out too is, you know, I did my collecting while I had a bunch of different career paths. You know, it took me a long time to hit my professional stride. You know, I started collecting cards when I was waiting tables, and I love waiting tables. My wife waits tables. Like, that is a huge thing, but you know, I didn't make as much money then as I did now. You know, I collected cards when I worked as a commercial fisherman on the weekends to make some extra money. You know, I've had all kinds of different jobs over the years, but I was always collecting and investing in the hobby, and that has paid dividends for me in the long run, because a lot of those cards that I bought, I have cards that I bought for a couple $100 back then, and they're worth, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 now. So there's a lot of value in getting in and buying them. And again, I still think that it's really important to call out that Pokemon is just coming of age, right? Like, we are just beginning to see what Pokemon from a collecting and investing in TCG standpoint is going to do. I think a lot of people are really excited about the hobby. A lot of people are getting back in there. Like, I always talk about the global reach, right? Like, Pokemon just launched in mainland China. They just launched a new language, simplified Chinese. Like, they are only going to get bigger, and that is only going to get better and better for us, and I love the fact that, Pokemon, at the end of the day, you don't have to worry about a lot. In cards in general, right? You don't have to worry about a lot of the politics, right? I talked about real estate. You don't have to worry about your insurance going up. I live in Florida. Real estate insurance is going through the roof. Our property taxes are going up. You don't have to worry about any of that in the card space. Now, all you have to worry about is that Pokemon Company continues to launch an amazing product. They continue to get further reach. They continue to get more people engaged. And that's just going to drive more interest in the hobby in the future. The other thing too is, we talked about it. Pokemon is fun. Collecting is fun. Listen, there are far worse things that you can spend your money on, even if everything goes to zero, than being a part of this amazing hobby. And I've said this a million times. It's not just the cardboard, it's also the people. You all are some of the most caring, genuine, heartfelt, it's just an amazing community, and I consider myself so honored to have the tiny little voice that I do here, and to be able to participate and talk with you all as often as I do, and it really is cool. And I just think this is a great group, and we have a lot of bright future ahead of us. Again, we might have some dark tunnels along the way. We might have some flat prairies, but at the end of the day, I really think that Pokemon has a whole lot of steam behind it, and I think that we're going to do really well in the long run. And most importantly, we're going to have a ton of fun along the way. So listen, if you made it to the end of this video and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you doing? We do fun, cool stuff like this all the time. So hit that subscribe button if you're interested. If you like what you saw, give us a thumbs up. Questions or comments, drop them down below. I appreciate you more than you know. You all have an epic Sunday. Thanks, everybody. Bye.